Have you ever wanted to learn biblical Greek, but you don't want to learn to read it? You kind of want to know enough to be able to understand the New Testament, but you don't want to do all of that extra work to be able to read it fluently. Well, this video, we're going to review a grammar which is designed specifically for you. Hi, I'm Daryl Burling from Master New Testament Greek, and I help people with the tools, habits, and system to master the Greek of the New Testament. If you're interested in learning biblical Greek and getting a richer and deeper knowledge and love for the Word of God, then this channel is for you. Go ahead, hit the subscribe button and the notify bell. That way, when your videos are released, you are the first to find out about it. And if you find this video helpful at all, hit the thumbs up button, and that really helps me out as well. I know that not everybody wants to master the Greek of the New Testament. For some people, it's like, I want to learn a little bit of Greek, but I don't want to do all that work of learning to read biblical Greek. Well, I hear you, and I understand that some people just want to go a little deeper and a little richer. Well, the grammar we're looking at today, which is this one by Danny Zacharias, is designed really with you in mind. This grammar recognizes that in seminaries all around the world today, fewer and fewer hours are being spent with the Greek language, and this grammar is really designed for seminaries that have only one semester of Greek available for students to take. Now, what sets this apart is that the goal of this, to do one semester of Greek, you're not going to be able to read biblical Greek in one semester. It's just putting a little bit too much into that one semester. And so what it's going to try and do is help you in that one semester to know enough biblical Greek so that you're able, with tools, with Logos Bible software specifically, to be able to work through the Greek text and understand what it means using the software. So this is really designed and set up so that you are using the language tools within Logos Bible software rather than having the independent ability to work directly with the text without any tools. Now, this goal, though, has some pretty important implications for the way this grammar is laid out. The first one, of course, is that it's 12 chapters. Now, most of the time, if you go to the average grammar, you're going to be looking at somewhere around 30 to 40 chapters. Some are a little more, some are a little less, but mostly around that 30, 35 kind of chapter mark. Now, that's designed specifically for a 2-semester classroom. This is a single semester, 12 chapters, and what that means is that chapters that would normally be broken up are all condensed down into a single chapter. So in chapter 2, for instance, you're going to learn about first, second, and third declension nouns. In chapter 4, you're going to learn about all the tense forms for the indicative verb. You're going to learn the present tense, the future tense, the imperfect tense, the perfect tense, and the aorist tense forms all in one chapter. In chapter 6, you're learning about the article and adjectives and pronouns and numbers all in one chapter. So each of these chapters is literally jam-packed with information. Now, what he does to offset that is he says to you, you don't have to remember all of this stuff. If you're working with biblical Greek using tools, you just have to get a bit of an overview of this chapter. And one of the things that's really helpful about this is that at the end of each chapter, he gives you a series of questions. You must be able to answer these questions to move on. So basically, and he calls this section the minimum required. Okay, so at the end of the chapter, here's the minimum that's required, and it's given to you in the form of questions. If you can answer those questions, you know the minimum required. So that's a really helpful approach, I think, and if all you're wanting to do is get a basics of Greek, then this is going to provide that basic foundation. Now, that doesn't mean to say, though, that when you go to this grammar, that you're going to expect to be able to just read it like a history book and not have any exercises. This has still got exercises at the end of each chapter. In fact, each chapter actually has 2 sets of exercises. And that goes back to, again, its goal. In one semester, you get the basics of the language, and in a second semester, it will take you through to the ability to read the New Testament, albeit with a reader's edition or something like that. So at the first time around, he gives you about 5 to 6, maybe 7 hours of exercises per chapter to get that basic layer. And then to add that advanced layer, it's probably about twice that in a second time around. So, and the goal of it is that, like, you do that, you'd go through the book the first time, you do the exercises, the basic exercises the first time, and then the second time around, you're doing the more advanced exercises. So you're going through this book twice. And I kind of like that as an approach, because a lot of the time people go through the first, the grammar for the first time, they don't feel like they have a grasp on it anyway, and they'll often go back and start it again. This book is actually designed for that, so that the second time around you've actually got those exercises as well. Speaking of exercises, a couple other things about the exercises in this is plugged into electronic tools. Now, there's a couple of ways it does this. First of all, it's going to refer you to Past Greek and to Paradigms Master Pro for practicing your passing. And I think this is fantastic, and I'd love to see more grammars actually point you to some of these tools rather than having you wait and submit lessons into your instructor before you know whether you've grasped the concepts of this chapter or not. So I think that's really good. For each lesson as well, in the exercises, he's also going to give you specific lessons within Logos Bible Software so that you're able to learn something about how Logos Bible Software works for each chapter as well. And this has some benefits too. So I like the technological integration with this. My only concern with that is that for some people, learning technology at the same time you're learning Greek grammar is going to be overwhelming. That's my only concern. But for younger people, digital natives particularly, I think this is a great approach. Finally, with regards to the exercises, he's going to take you through the vocabulary that occurs 100 times or more. Now, normally you're going to get the vocabulary that occurs 50 times or more in most grammars, but this one is only 100 times or more. So you're not getting the same vocabulary exposure in this grammar that you would in others. So those are just some high-level overview, and all of those things are related to that goal of making sure you just have a working knowledge of the language so that you can work with Logos Bible Software, and then the second time around would go to that reading level. Let me just pause for a moment. Are you enjoying this? Could you hit the thumbs up button for me? That would be really helpful. Thanks. Let's get back to it. So that's some observations. Let me give you my pros and cons of this grammar. The first one is that Danny Zacharias' explanations are very down to earth, very easy to read, and very understandable. He uses really simple language that is easy to grasp. And I think this is one of the real strengths of this. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later on. Another thing I really like about this is the way they use colors. And I'll show you this in a moment. But here you've got these different colors that have been used. And on the next page, he then goes through and takes a sentence and rearranges it, keeping the colors on the different syntactical components. So you can see, for instance, that Greek word order can change the order of the words around, but it doesn't change the meaning of the words. The use of color and formatting in this volume is very good. Now, the only thing I would say to just offset that a little is that with each of these pages, you can see here, this is quite a big block of text, and you do have these headings on the side here. I would have liked to have seen these headings in line just to give a bit more, just to break up the text a little bit more. But you can also see here down the side, I have wide margins, which is the benefit of having the headings in the side, so I can take notes and so on in the margins. So I really like the formatting of this, and the pages are a nice, thick, quality paper, so that taking notes, you're not going to bleed through into the page behind it or anything like that. And so that's one of the reasons why it's actually looks a reasonably thick book, but it's only 280 pages. It's because the quality of paper is high, and I really appreciate that about this grammar as well. Another thing I really like about this is that even though there's a lot of information in each chapter, and I'll talk about that in just a moment, there is at the end of each chapter that question, this is the least you need to know. I think that's a helpful way to approach this as well. So there's a lot to commend this, and I think the good descriptions and explanations, the use of color and formatting quality, very good. The least you need to know section, the fact that he embraces technology throughout this, and then the fact that you're going to learn Logos Bible Software while you're learning Greek. I think all of this is very good, very positive, and on the basis of those alone, this grammar is to be commended. There are a couple of things that I think detract from this a little bit. And the main one really, and again, goes back to that overarching goal. The main one is the density of information in here. Each chapter has got so much information in it that I think that it's just it's a lot to take in. A lot of people want to actually master the contents of a chapter before they move on to the next chapter. With this grammar, I think that would send some people over the edge, and I think they would end up just feeling like they could never get this. It's too much information, and they'd never actually move on, which means they'd never actually learn the language. Even though there's a lot of information, at the beginning of many of these chapters, he does tell you don't need to memorize this. You don't need to learn all these details, and I think that's where the least you need to know section at the end of each chapter is really helpful. The density of information is a challenge in this, but he does try to offset that by telling you don't worry about memorizing this, just kind of get your head around it and then focus on the least you need to know at the end of it. One thing I thought could have been a little clearer is that a lot of people, when they come to a Greek grammar, don't actually have much knowledge of how language and grammar works in their own language or at all, never mind in a new language. And I felt that this could do with a little bit more explanation of grammatical principles. For instance, on page 19, when we're talking about pronouns, Dr. Zacharias does mention prepositions. Now, if you don't know what a preposition is, all of that discussion, and there's about a paragraph there, is kind of lost on you. So I think there's some room for a little bit more explanation of grammar, and I think this could be complemented with a English grammar or something like that to help out. So would I recommend this grammar? Well, it depends on the approach that you're taking. If you want to learn the basics of the language without really having to learn to read the text, so if you're happy to work with something like Logos Bible software, then this is a very good grammar, and I think it's worthwhile. Another couple of scenarios that I think this would be worth investing in would be if you are refreshing your Greek. One of the things with refreshing Greek is you already have a bit of a background, and really all you're doing is just sort of shoring that up, pulling it back together, and putting it in a usable form again so you can work with it. And I think this is actually a really good refreshing Greek grammar because it condenses everything down into these chapters that have a lot of concepts in them. Now, if you've already done Greek, that's not going to be such a challenge for you, and this gives you then basically a 12-week plan to refreshing your Greek, and I think that's good. And at the same time, you're going to learn how Logos Bible software works, and that's going to be a good thing. So I think this is great as a refreshing Greek grammar, and I would also add that if you're using another grammar that provides some of those things like the English explanations and a little bit more vocabulary, and perhaps is aimed at helping you to read, this would be a very good supplementary grammar as well, and I would recommend it to you on that basis. So let me ask you, what's your goal with regards to Biblical Greek? Do you want to learn to read the language fluently? Are you more interested in being able to use the tools, which is what the goal of this grammar is? Leave a comment in the comment section below. I look forward to hearing from you. If this video has been helpful, hit the thumbs up button. That really helps me, and it helps the YouTube algorithm to know that this is a helpful video. Have you got a grammar you might like me to review? If so, leave it in the comment section below. I look forward to hearing from you there. And check this out, see what you think. I'll leave a link in the description below, and you can go and check this out and get a copy for yourself and take a look through it. I look forward to hearing from you and what you think of a grammar like this and the approach this takes. And in the meantime, keep taking small, consistent steps toward mastery, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. See you then.